Coming, everybody. We're going to formally begin a spiritual service for Brother BERN NIX. So we would like to thank Tom Goodman and Priscilla for the use of the Korean Culture Center here. It's a wonderful space. Looks like we got just the right amount of people. So we are all here to celebrate the life of Brother BERN NIX. And there he is. We'd like to thank Dashiell Fielder from the Jazz Foundation for bringing the posters. And BERN himself is technically, in a way, on the piano over there in that silver urn over there. If you want to pay your respects in a personal manner, technically he's there physically. Spiritually, I guarantee BERN is here. Right there. Though he's a lot larger now, though. You know, his spirit is really big, and he's far beyond the constraints of this room right here. So, yeah, right. Yeah, thanks, MTA. So we got an organic kind of thing we're going to do here. We've got a program. It's not 100% locked in about what's going to go down. We're very happy and very honored that some of the Nix family is here. Edna Nix, Rick Nix are here joining us. And I just met, I'm sorry, I don't know your name yet. I'm sorry. And Sydney. So some of BERN's family has traveled far to come and join us here to celebrate Brother BERN. I also call Master BERN. So I'm just going to do a short intro, and then we're going to get into it. And there's going to be food and stuff out there in the lobby, so feel free to move back and forth. And I'm just going to say a few words here about my fallen brother BERN. People today in 2017 have accepted lower and lower standards for quality and authenticity across the board. But when it comes to being the real thing, in realms of being an artist, you just can't get any more real than BERN NIX. So many artists, regardless of any generation, reach a point where living their life with their art or music as their priority becomes impossible. Many people decide to abandon their creative lives and focus on stability. Still, other people have long careers outside of music, and they turn their art into a hobby. Then we have the extraordinarily rare person who gives everything to their music: heart, body, and soul. And BERN was one of these BERN was one of these rare and special people. People who risk everything. And some people will say that it's a personal decision about whether you give your life to music like that. But I'm not so sure about that. I think some people are literally music. And BERN NIX was music walking around. And for somebody like that, that's what he is. That's his natural reality, you know. And one of the reasons BERN and I were so tight is that we had a mutual bond of survival. And during the BERN NIX Quartet rehearsals with Francois Griot and Reggie Sylvester, we would often look around at each other and say, it's pretty incredible that we're even all in this room actually working on music. You know, so over the years, BERN watched as New York City became a very different place from the one he arrived in when he joined Ornette Coleman for 13 years. There's a picture of BERN with Ornette over there on the wall with Primetime. During that time, BERN lived with Ornette, and you just can't go any deeper into pursuit of harmonics. So when it went to that, BERN, you can't go any farther. You just can't. BERN used to always talk about at a certain point, in realms of his spirituality, he used that Ronald Shannon Jackson got him into chanting. And but when the things he would manifest wouldn't work out, Ronald Shannon Jackson would tell him he wasn't chanting right. And BERN used to talk about that all the time. He's like, you're not chanting hard enough, your rhythm's off, because he would keep chanting and things wouldn't change. So BERN used to talk about that all the time. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? But one time I was talking to BERN about that, and he stepped beyond that, and he got kind of serious, and he said that what he believed in was music, and his personal spiritual belief was that music was life. What that was his spiritual practice, and he said almost by default that he believed that what he was doing served a higher purpose. And it reminded me of what the late Roy Campbell Jr. said, it's all about the music. And that many of us don't understand the true nature and power of who we are and what we do. So to keep it moving, I'm gonna move past that paragraph real quick and say it's just important for us to recognize just how brilliant BERN was, and I'm sure he still is. BERN NIX was a true master at organic, dissonant, harmonic harmony. I mean, seriously, the way that BERN played the way that BERN played the guitar, there was no guitar player in the world that could do what he did. I mean, how many people live on the planet? There's only one BERN NIX, and what he did with the guitar is just, it's really beyond what any of us can really, he was a deep creator on the instrument, and there's nobody even close to doing what he's doing. And not trying to say rank guitar players, I'm just saying BERN made an epic creative achievement in what he did with the guitar. And BERN NIX is part of the legacy and the story of the guitar itself. If you're gonna talk about the guitar, you're gonna have to mention BERN NIX. So, I just leave it with that. Besides the music, it's the personal moments that we shared with BERN that we'll miss more than anything, and I'm sure that many of you here will agree. But now BERN has moved on. He's been called home, and he is truly free at last. So the world and all of our lives have been made better for joining him down his path. May God bless Brother BERN NIX. There you go. So, first on the program is our friend Cheryl Pyle. Cheryl had a duo with BERN, and they played a lot of gigs. In fact, BERN's last gig, after his gig with us, just a few days before he passed, was here with Cheryl. And I will turn it over now to Cheryl Pyle. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Matt for inviting me to be a part of this celebration. My story with BERN begins about the last 5 years of his life. I'd been playing more free jazz since 2011 because I had skin cancer on my lip, and so I was trying out just a short set here and there, and I actually played my first free jazz set with Nick Gianni, who's here, to try out my new embouchure. That was at ABC No Rio. So I played there and other jazz places. I started seeing BERN sitting there listening, and it seemed like every concert I played, he was there listening. I think I met him at ABC No Rio, and he was listening, and we talked and we jammed, and it seemed as if we were friends from the first meeting. He arrived in the 70s here, and I came in 80, and we had a lot of memories of, you know, that time in the East Village and Soho. I had played this place in Soho duo with Francois and flute and bass, and we all had dinner after the set, and we talked. And one of the Beyond Trio's first concerts was at Shapeshifter Lab. I tried to do birthday concerts to celebrate. And that was with Roberta Pickett and Newman Taylor Baker. And again, Bern was there. He mentioned that it took him 2 hours to get there on the subway because we could never find Shapeshifter Lab. But anyway, Roberta luckily gave us a ride back to the city in the car, and we talked about music and life and playing. When I was going to play that May at Downtown Music Gallery, Bruce said, "Oh, I'd love to hear you and Bern play duo." So we recorded and we jammed, and the Beyond duo became a group. I always called Bern to play, and he always said yes. The Beyond group played trio format, quartet, larger forms. Carmen Moore conducted us. He's here today. He played almost every concert with us up until his last concert, May 28th at Shrine. And we played trio that night, soprano, flute, and guitar, and said goodbye to him at the bar, "See you soon." And I would always take his hand to say goodbye and kiss him on the cheek, and oh God, I hope I don't cry. And he would always take my hand and kiss my hand. That was Bern. The duo concerts with Bern were pure improvisational streams of consciousness, seeking expression in original sound. Bern was authentic and cool, and also humble, because he seemed to sense we were all spirit in different disguises. His musical ideas would stream into my ideas, creating complex forms, creating counterpoint in an unspoken way. His non-judgment and acceptance revealed a true heart-filled person to me, with experience, authentic, unique, and honest. His playing was beautiful, abstract, fearless, ever moving forward, leaving space and connecting ideas to push the improvisations to become magical and complex through composed and intrinsic sounds. And the combination of movement and stillness enabled the unleashing of creativity in all directions. He said that we had joined Harmolodics Anonymous. He told me after one concert he was just trying to play something beautiful. And no matter how abstract the improvisations were, it was always beautiful and it was always musical. We played April 9th this year with the Beyond Trio, and again May 28th at Shrine, our last concert with Bern, for which I'm truly grateful to have played music with him that night. And I feel grateful to have played so much music with him the last 5 years of his life. I just want to close with a short ballad I wrote the night he died. And this Rumi quote: "Be grateful for whoever comes by, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond."
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And next up is a true brother. Raymond Balley Jr. is a true brother to BERN NIX. I never seen anybody look out for. I mean, Ray really was looking out for BERN over the years, and he's a good friend of ours, and Mr. Raymond Balley Jr.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to try to get through this, and really like what Matt said, the flute was beautiful. And I'm going to read it a little fast, so I hope you don't mind, because I clocked it at 8 minutes and 30 seconds, so maybe it'll be a little shorter, maybe longer. And there's a hole in my life, and no one's going to fill it. There's only one BERN NIX. I thank God for bringing him into my life. To me, as Matt was talking about with music, he's eternal and he's ever present. BERN called himself, quote, a Midwestern jazz fugitive, a debauched secular humanist, and of course, a card-carrying member of Harmologix Anonymous. These are all direct quotes. I just think of BERN as a young guy who played guitar and wanted to be a jazz guitar player and devoted his life to it. I think BERN sacrificed a lot, and over the years, I think maybe too much. But as he would always say, what else could I do? His dedication to his art, his practice regimen, which was incredible. You know, at the end, he would only practice 2 hours or 3 hours a day because he got very tired. But you know, when I knew him early on, it was 6 hours a day, you know, and more. You know, his humility and his lack of resentments was real, and it was brave. The abuse that he took, which is that's what I call it, he never did, was almost too much for one human being to endure. That's how I felt. But, you know, he did it with a lot of humor, and then he'd always say to me, well, you know, that's show business. Although BERN did have a few meltdowns, I know that for sure. He had a meltdown at Bellevue once, and security had to take him out. I don't know if anybody knows that story, but and a couple other places where he had some major meltdowns. So that was good because you can't hold it all in, you know. I knew BERN wanted to play gigs, so I tried to get him gigs, and I drove him to gigs. I'd bring my Fender amp to gigs, and he would always say to me, Gibson makes the best guitars, Fender makes the best amps. And then I'd set the amp up, I'd bring it in, and he'd go, oh, turn the bass way up and turn the treble down. I was like, okay. So then he'd turn his tone knob all the way down, and I'd have treble on 2 or 3, and he would go, and he'd play, and he'd go, oh, it's too bright, turn it down more. So that was interesting. One time we went to Baltimore. I had a Pontiac Vibe, which is like a little hatchback. I drove BERN, Jackson, and Francois, and we went and got Jackson. He was the drummer, Jackson Kroll. I opened up the hatchback, and the corner of the door caught my eye up here, and boom, just blood started pouring out. And I grabbed something and held it like this. And I remember my first thought was, I can't say anything to BERN. I got to just, you know, stop the bleeding and put the drums in the car because he would panic or get very nervous. And he had a lot of anxiety about, you know, getting the car, getting on time, getting on the road and all that, you know, because it was always like, you know, put together with Scotch tape, you know, that kind of thing. So I did stop the bleeding. I got the drums in the car. And then we went and got Francois on the bass. And I remember there was a discussion about whether we were going to put the bass on the roof or Francois. We weren't really sure. In the end, we all got in the car. We drove to Baltimore. It was a fantastic show. It was a great show. I wish we recorded that one. It was very That was a very powerful trio. That was a very powerful trio. And afterward, a guy and his high school son came up and talked to the band after. I don't know if you remember that, Francois. That was really good, very gratifying. And then on the way back, we stopped at a rest stop. I'm going to cry over this. And we got Cinnabons, and we ate Cinnabons under a huge oak tree right off the highway. I mean, you know, it was great. I got Bern a gig at the Elizabeth Public Library. My friend Joe was the director. And he said, "Oh, I'd love to book the band, but you know, I can only offer $500, so I'm sure they can't do it." And I said, "No, that'll be fine." And Bern and Bill Zola played bass back then, and Adrian Velosin played drums. They played with Bern for a long time, and it was a great show. And I remember Bern did "Take the A Train." He did about a 15-minute version of "Take the A Train," and let me tell you, it was unbelievable. And that was the concert. I had seen Bern perform since the late 80s or mid 80s, but that's the concert that I suddenly, all of a sudden in the middle of that concert, I thought, Bern is speaking to me. It was the first time, and it took me all those years to kind of get that, you know. That was incredible. We did it, yeah. Then they did a gig, this is another gig, just these are memorable gigs, at the Priory, which was a jazz brunch. That was also with Bill and Adrian. And after it was a great show. There was a big jazz brunch, a lot of people. And then this older gentleman walked up to Bern and handed him a piece of paper at the end of the set. And it was a letter saying how his music wasn't real music and how horrible he was. And yeah, and a couple of his friends came up and apologized. And you know, I told Bern, like, look, this, you know, and he's like, why would anybody spend their time doing that, you know? But those are the kinds of things that, you know, we went through, or he went through. And, you know, back then, too, Bern needed that money, whether it was a $40 gig or a $50 gig or a $10 gig, because, you know, he had to pay his phone bill and the rent, and we talked about that all the time. I never understood why club owners, managers, record labels would just ignore him. I didn't understand it. I really didn't. Back then, too, every show he ended with the Meters' Sissy Strut. I don't know if you guys remember that. Every show, Sissy Strut was the last song. It was great. And I always said to him, you got to record that. That would be a hit. It was fantastic. And then I asked him why he didn't play it with the quartet. He said, because I wrote Under the Volcano. That's my version. I was like, oh, okay. Also, we did a gig at Norman Mailer's apartment. It was a private party. Bern played on my records, and I do rock music. I don't do jazz, so I'm not a jazz player. But he would play with me, and he played on my records. And the apartment was 3 levels. So the first level, second level had a ladder, and that on a balcony, and the third level, where Norman used to write, had a rope ladder. So it was harder, successive levels of, you know. So I realized when Bern got there, like, how was he going to get up this ladder? That's we were performing on this balcony, but he did, and we had a great show. And then afterward, I had 2 friends of mine spot him as he came down the ladder, because it was pretty intense. But he had a lot of fun, and that was a great gig. I took lessons from Bern in the 80s. That's when I met him, in the mid 80s at Context Studios. And then we'd walk up Avenue A with our guitars. And this is true. Everybody would say hello to Bern. Hey, Bern. Hey, Bern. Hey, Bern. Hey, Bern. Guy laying on the sidewalk. Hey, Bern, how you doing, man? I'm not kidding. And then he would say, hey, man, how's it going, man? Said, and then he would tip his hat, you know, do that. Hey, man. He'd tip his hat. That was incredible. In the late 90s, I started working on a film, and I asked Bern to do the soundtrack. And then I think 4 or 5 years, I told him, we talked about it over the years, and then 4 or 5 years later, I mailed him a check and a letter, and he started working on it. The soundtrack is great, and someday I hope to release it, although he always said to me, can you give the guys some money when you release it? Because he was always concerned that the guys who played with him would get a little money. I'd like to thank all the musicians who, you know, Bern wanted to play guitars, and as Matt beautifully said, made his mark on the guitar. Dave Capella, William Parker, the first musicians I saw him play with, Bill Zola, Adrian Velosin, they played for years. And Bern was always worried about getting a steady bass player. He used to say to me, you can't do this music with 1 or 2 rehearsals. And it was really, there were periods there where he didn't have a steady player. So when Francois came along, it was a big deal. It really was. You really were the anchor for him. And you know, Matt, he always told me that, he told me once that he would, if he had a 4th musician, it would be a percussionist. So I don't know how you did it, but you did it, and I thank you for that. And I'd also like to shout out and give a big thanks to the Jazz Foundation, because I talked to Bern at night for many years, and he always talked about his phone bill, and I paid him for the soundtrack, and I'd mail him checks. I didn't have enough money to pay him, so I always send him checks, whatever they were, $50, $100, $20 for years, and to pay for the commission of the soundtrack, and always talked about struggling with money. But I noticed in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't remember it exactly, he kind of stopped talking about it. And I think that the Jazz Foundation removed that financial stress and anxiety, because that weighed very deeply on Bern. And the last thing I want to say is my son James is 14, plays the piano, and I wanted Bern to do some lessons with him, play tunes, and we never had a chance to do it. And then we're doing a little gig at a cafe at a train station. So I said to Bern, "Hey, would you play with my son and some duets and then play with my band and come out here and he's like, "Yeah, man, I'll do it." And what songs does he want to do? And I said, "Oh, he wants to do My Foolish Heart." And he paused and he goes, "Oh, I've never done that in public." And there he was, done everything in music, played with all these people, done his thing, kept marching on, and there he is, last spring playing with a 14-year-old on piano and guitar, playing My Foolish Heart and Blue Bossa, and I just feel like that's Bern, and they sounded great. I had a lot of plans. I wanted to help Bern get some more gigs. I wanted to record. I really wish I could talk to him, and I can't, but he's with me, so thank you.
Thanks, Raymond. And Reggie Sylvester and Francois Grill, would you please come to the front? Yeah. So I'm trying to go back and forth between notes and words. This is the BERN NIX Quartet without Bern, and we have how many? We got over 30. We got at least 20 of Bern's tunes, but we're gonna do one that Bern wrote called "Less Is More," which Bern wrote for a poet, and it's also part of his philosophy. You can usually say a lot more with less. We'll start. We'll play it for you in just a couple seconds here.
You knew that Les is written L-E-S, not L-E-S-S.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It was
Right?
one S.
It's Leslie,
No, yeah.
right?
No, sometimes it's.
That was a joke, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a joke. No, it was with one S.
Man, I hate to put you on the spot. But it's... Yeah, I'm going to use that amp. Can you make this sound?
Oh, it's gonna be this crazy home switch.
Sure. We're going to start with this as well, right? Yeah. This 2S. That was my mistake. So never mind.
He's gonna do the solo and then we'll go in.
You got it?
Tom Goodman. What's the problem?
Tom?
Oh, so the switch is in the back.
Hello, sorry, we don't need Tom.
We don't need Tom. Sorry,
We
Tom.
need Tom, but not.
Not too loud.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
We don't want that distortion thing.
Just while we sit up here, I'll let you know Francois played with Bern for 17 years. And they truly had a profound musical connection. It was the heart of the quartet was what was going on. Long time conversation between Francois and Bern. Go ahead, man. Sorry.
Yeah. It all started with Jackson Kroll, which I invited, but I guess didn't make it to us tonight. And we played a long time together with Jackson. We had a good gig. We did we did quite a few gigs actually. It's nice to be with him. Anyway, he didn't respond to my invite, but he's here. Jackson is here. We played we played a lot of good music together. And yeah, that was that. Lasted a long time, unbelievably.
How did we
You know.
ever?
How did he end it?
How did we ever? How did we ever?
One day we did it's a funny story. I'm gonna tell it because it's too funny. Shenad, what's her name?
Dolberger.
Dolberger got married, but she was friends with a very good drummer of us, John McLellan. So she said, I want the BERN Nix trio to play with John McLellan instead of BERN Nix. And BERN Nix then Jackson Kroll got really offended with it. So that's the bottom of the story, which is kind of pity, but that's what happened. And then
the day.
and then we never played with Jackson again,
And then the day that.
which is kind of too weird. I have to tell it the way it is, I guess. It's probably better, right? Isn't it? And then we never heard about Jackson again. Then we had a few more drummers in the kitchen where we usually rehearsed. You ever been there? Well, maybe you come there. You know, I'm talking to Edna, and then the place to remember. And then when they said, "Well, I got a drummer," I said, "Okay." And then he called Reggie, and then Reggie came to the kitchen, and that was the end of that. There was no more audition.
I didn't even know it was gonna be an audition.
Francois Griot and Reggie Sylvester for BERN NIX. Thank you, brothers. Thanks, guys. we're definitely going to miss our kitchen sessions with Bern. Believe that. So next up is my new friend, Christine Hughes. Someone very close to Bern that I only met in person for the first time today. And Christine is gonna, this isn't a musical thing. It's not poetry, right? This is just straight up talking. This is there's no music part of this. But there will be music after this. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Christine Hughes.
All right, tell me if you can hear me. No, I got too much to do here.
Okay.
All right, is that good? Can you hear me, Edna? Mike.
Let me try to.
How's that? Okay. Not yet.
There we go.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
She says yes.
Oh, I'm not Mike, but I can hear you.
Okay. Bern and I were together for 10 years, all of the 90s and then some. It seems very funny to say that. The time flew by. It was just life. Two artistes, as he would say, trying to survive and enjoy life in New York. We first met, I think, at Guillemets. Bern and I, both being Virgos, would always get to the party at about 8:15 when everybody else would roll in at about 10 o'clock. We liked to dance. We had a great group of friends who were always getting together. I loved jazz, and Bern found painting a pleasant mystery. We gave each other the time and space we needed to do our work. It was a rich life, not without struggles. When our relationship began to get serious, my father came in from Detroit to meet Bern. We were at my place on Canal Street. My father 6'2", Bern not far behind. My father, as Lester, our friend, would say, was a mountain of mean. I really wanted them to like each other. My not too big to begin with painting studio got very small. I could tell when they shook hands and looked each other in the eye, they recognized each other. My father saw in Bern the same things which I loved: his gentleness, his intellect, his dogged determination, his humor, and the seriousness he had for his craft. I trusted my father would see, and he did. Later that evening, my father said to me that it seemed like Bern had the weight of the world on his shoulders. Bern was a practicing Buddhist for many, many years. I came across this passage in Pema Chodron's book, which made me think of what my father said so many years ago. I think it speaks to the way Bern was in the world. I cherish all the time we had together. So what I'm going to read you, Pema Chodron uses the word bodhicitta, which roughly translates to mean awakened heart. When we experience the soft spot of bodhicitta, it's like returning home. It's as if we had amnesia for a very long time and awakened to remember who we really are. The poet Rumi writes of night travelers who search the darkness instead of running from it, a companionship of people willing to know their own fear, whether it's in the small fears of a job interview or the unnameable terrors imposed by war, prejudice, hatred, whether it's in the loneliness of a widow or the horrors of children shamed or abused by a parent. In the tenderness of the pain itself, night travelers discover the light of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is available in moments of caring for things, when we clean our glasses or brush our hair. It's available in moments of appreciation, when we notice the blue sky or pause and listen to the rain. It's available in moments of gratitude when we recall a kindness or recognize another person's courage. It's available in music and dance, in art and in poetry. Whenever we let go of holding on to ourselves and look at the world around us, whenever we connect with sorrow, whenever we connect with joy, whenever we drop our resentment and our complaint, in those moments, bodhicitta is here. Spiritual awakening is frequently described as a journey to the top of a mountain. We leave our attachments and our worldliness behind and slowly make our way to the top. At the peak, we have transcended all pain. The only problem with this metaphor is that we leave all the others behind. Our drunken brother, our schizophrenic sister, our tormented animals and friends. Their suffering continues, unrelieved by our personal escape. In the process of discovering bodhicitta, the journey goes down, not up. It's as if the mountain pointed toward the center of the earth instead of reaching into the sky. Instead of transcending the suffering of all creatures, we move toward the turbulence and doubt. We jump into it. We slide into it. We tiptoe into it. We move toward it however we can. We explore the reality and the unpredictability of insecurity and pain, and we try not to push it away. If it takes years, if it takes lifetimes, we let it be as it is. At our own pace, without speed or aggression, we move down and down and down. With us move millions of others, our companions in awakening from fear. At the bottom, we discover water, the healing water of bodhicitta. Right down there in the thick of things, we discover the love that will not die. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Next in the program, speaking of authenticity and originality, there is only one Ross Moshe, and there is only one Dave Ross. I don't see them, no. There goes Ross. Okay. Oh, and we are being joined on drums by Leonid. Leonid Galaganov on drums is added to the program. So, okay.
Just wanted to give thanks to Matt Lavelle and the musicians and the artists and the speakers and yourselves for coming, and to this very nice space for facilitating this, and greetings to the family. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were his sister. I would have spoken earlier. I'm sorry about that. I did meet Bern's brother. Thankfully, it was an honor. Thank you very much. Just briefly, to keep things moving, I first started seeing Bern play in the early 80s in the lower part of Manhattan with Jamil Moondock, and he was in a band called the Sedition Ensemble as well. That's around the time I first started hanging out around in that area, and they were on the money, all those bands, you know. And just briefly again, directions in music, especially in jazz, initially get pioneered by people who take those initial lumps to put forward a musical style that gets accepted later on. But that's not too uncommon with art that starts out so-called controversial or hard to understand. And BERN was one of those people, especially based on the technicalities of what's called downtown, whatever that's supposed to be, around town, cross town, other side of town. But that particular musical style is a synthesis of free jazz and other forms of music that's more rhythmic, coming out of black music, where it's very bass and rhythmic centric, and fusing these elements together. And the music of Arnett and the Primetime Band was in the forefront of establishing a sound that spread. And of course, that sound was based on the individual contributions of each person in the band to make a whole, as well as Music Revelation Ensemble, Blood Alma, Defunct, and you all know this already. But anyway, much thanks to you, and we're gonna play a little bit for you, and then some other great music is gonna come your way, as well as some great speakers. Dave Ross on guitar. Leonid Galaganov on the drums. And we live not too far from each other, so I kind of saw him every other day. You know, I had the tendency to run into him a lot in different parks, a lot of times in Boston Market. We used to joke about that. The mashed potatoes and stuff. Yeah. Nice brother, you know. I always enjoyed talking to him, you know. We were buffs about TV shows and music, jazz records and stuff. It was always a lot of fun talking to him. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Leonid Galanagov, Brother Ross, and Dave Ross. Music for BERN NIX.
Matt Lavelle. Organized.
Thank you. So, actually, we're going to attempt a 5-minute intermission to set up more chairs because we've got a lot of people standing on the side and around the back. So, give us about 5 minutes. We're trying to set up some more chairs, and then we'll get right back to it. Thank you. Okay. So we're gonna get back on the program now. And where's she at? Where she is? Okay. So many I knew BERN NIX before I started playing with him, and almost every time I saw him, I would see Susan Young. Because every time I saw BERN, Sue was there. I mean, they were basically buddies. And I mean, I rarely saw them not near one another. And so Sue and BERN were tight. And she's gonna, I think, do a poem, and I'll let her take it over from here. She asked us to play some of BERN's music in the background while she does her thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, Susan Young.
Impromptu, because I was hearing the Philharmonic Hall music at Prospect Park, and they did this beautiful piece of Dvorak's New World Symphony. And so this is called Going Home. I don't know. Oh, Going Home. I don't know. I don't know if I'm in tune or not, but it has a G flat. Only musicians would know what I mean by that. That's B-E-A-D and then G. I mean, that's how you know your flats. Okay, so this is Going Home. Can you read the note there? Sure. Because it was very, to hear everybody sing this at the Philharmonic Hall. So it kind of brought tears to my eyes to hear this music and maybe try to sing it.
You're gonna sing it? Okay.
Sure. I don't know the lyrics.
You're harmonic, just go. Go. You got it.
I can't.
Go ahead, you got it. I don't even know what you're doing.
Going home, going home, I'm going home, quiet like some still day. I'm just going home, it's not far, just close by, through an open door. Work all done, care laid by, going to fear no more. Mother's there expecting me, father's waiting too. Lots of folks gathered there, all the friends I knew. So there's a lot of familiar faces here. And one of the first things I realized about BERN NIX was when I saw him at Joe Papp's performing with Ornette Coleman. And I realized something about what it was to be on stage or to be like and to be chosen to perform with Ornette. I mean, the most unusual characters is who he prefers. So at the time also I was writing poetry, being an activist in Chinatown, so you don't ever heard of the Confucius Plaza demonstration, but you know, in order to be an artist, you have to make some noise. So like as an Asian group, we went to New York and read poetry and stuff, but like I realized when seeing BERN and the musicians play jazz that they needed words. So when eventually through Friend in Common, the parties that I would go to in the East Village and so on, and meet BERN and Jerome Cooper, Billy Bang, a lot of those cats, as you would call them, would, you know, flow on by, pass on by, and stuff like that. So also I was learning, I mean, eventually I got to learn video. And through video, I met Dora Green. And through Dora Green, she needed a bass player, so she asked BERN to perform with her, and because Wilbur Morris couldn't perform with her dancing. It was beautiful dancing that I was videoing, and Sabir Mateen. So the two got hooked up together, and it's just amazing. Like wherever BERN goes, all the musicians would gravitate and want to perform with him. And there are stories, of course, like I was just fascinated with his guitar playing. It's very distinctive. It's pizzicato, it's clear, very clear, and lots of things like that. And, you know, would miss that kind of, was it a tenor or a alto sound? And the guitar. I mean, tenor. Okay, tenor. Good voice.
So all the way down to this one.
Boing. And the most amazing part, how he taught the group how to end in one beat. And that was the last performance that I was able to video him at the Winston Unity Hall. And I mean, I asked him, I mean, I wanted to do a performance, a multimedia performance with my slice of world travels around the world and how it relates to being Asian in America, blah, 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 so on. So, and he was willing to compose pieces for me, which I was able to tape, but haven't put that on YouTube yet. But I've been trying to follow his career and understand what harmolodics mean. And there were moments that harmolodic fit in so well. So there's so much more to say about Bern and his monetary worries and his political points of view of like how Francois performed with him for Leonard Pelzer, right? Exactly. Right. So I couldn't participate in this sort of like fundraise for one man to be free when you're thinking of how we all should be free and performing and getting the dream, American dream we have. So, yeah, right. Right. Ding, 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 ding. Okay. One of the last things I asked Bern was to like back me up with this latest poem. I managed to get myself a chapbook after 45 years or something like that. But I mean, you know, but this is number 2 because the first series was somewhere else. 79 was the end of small presses. I confirmed that. But it took a while. So this is called Tones. Tones. Sound tones. Skin tones. Shades of colors. Recording sound. Notes taken from afar. Mind tones, healing, throbbing pains, beating atonements out. Music systems. Oh yeah, another thing, I wanted him to do more rock theories and so on, because whenever I've seen Bern, if challenged, he'll do it. He'll do it. And I just heard Jane Cortez and him perform one of her pieces, and it's amazing that a lot of this will be forgotten, especially Amare Baraka and all the leaders in the black movement. I mean, in the various artistic forms that we have here. Mind tones, healing, throbbing pains, beating, atonements out. Music systems tarried and sounded from centuries afar. Oppressions made in shades, tinted pink and cerulean blue, green, turquoise blues, blue, black blues. Dug out. Oh, graves, fumigated tones. Often tones are returned to humming phrases worth repeating pleasantly on a scale of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, definitive music tones tuned for a few who you pretend knowing. Tones made to hear skin, bones rattling, koto heartbeats, pizzicato, fears, angers, slurs to zip up and down legato, smooth, rough edges. And that was something about Bern being a gentle giant, very sweet, shy, you might say, but he can laugh and make these jokes. I mean, the jokes he makes about me is sort of like, well, he would sing this love for sale. I mean, there might be moments that was a possibility, but have somebody who can afford to give a party, you gotta have Bern join. I mean, I even got him to be at the Bowery Poetry Club, and how often can the musicians be there now? I mean, you know, it's only a younger generation, and it's like, what's happened to this musical gap of 20 years? I mean, it's on tape. That's all I can say. And I'm so glad that Bern got to perform at the Iridium. That was the best highlight of his life, I think. Oh, and there was a time when he performed at Charlie's where you could get on 42nd Street, Times Square, right? Free shrimp, right? All the shrimp you could eat. Everyone was eating shrimp. They weren't listening to the music. I mean, what's wrong with them?
John McClellan and everybody, every drummer we played, right?
I'm sure you have.
We tried every drummer.
I don't know about audition. I just know.
I think we might have
Well, Reggie is one of the coolest drummers. And Francois, man, he had me jumping and swerving at that restaurant. No, not that bar.
What? That
Cake,
bar?
cake,
Was it
cake
bar or
shop.
restaurant?
Cake shop,
One or
cake
the other.
shop.
Was
The
it
cake
bar? I
shop.
think it was bar.
Huh? It was yeah, right. I mean, it's like, oh, I don't need this.
Yeah, I think
But it was fun.
we could always get drinks there, you know, depending on the bucket.
Yeah, okay. But I have to get, my time is up. My time is up. Okay, bye.
Susan York, ladies and gentlemen. And that's from the heart, believe me. And
Yeah, I know. This guy's gonna buy my paper.
so we're going back and forth between notes and words, but Larry Rowland is both. Larry Rowland is a tremendous bass player and a tremendous poet. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Larry Rowland.
You need my bass, all right? You need my bow? No. You need me? No.
How's everyone doing? Usually I don't make these, but I'm here now. And I have to thank Matt Lavelle. Matt Lavelle done a tremendous job in just putting this together, as well as other folks who have had a hand in helping him. It's a beautiful thing when you're remembered. Beautiful. Bern and I, we weren't that close, but we were close. Close enough to write something after Matt requested. He said he liked the way I write. I said, really? Okay. So hopefully I can do some justice for Bern in explaining how I felt about Bern and how I saw him. I'm going to play a little bit of bass as the intro, and I'm going to read something that I just finished about an hour ago. fall. The melody, the rhythm, and harmony, traveling through an open space. Ready and able to defend our extreme sincerity of what we do. Out, in, resolve, begin, but be in the moment of you. Out, in, resolve, begin, but be in the moment of you. BERN NIX, the perfect fit in a life hitch to the music realm of the controversial, in sound rituals of the burning and nixing of the conventional. BERN NIX his intellect sharp, his humor sarcastic, his sardonically tinged ramblings of issues of sincere concern were an extension of his music and did not compromise or wait for you to get it. He was often on to his next idea as you struggled to capture the first as it got on a 14th Street bus and doors closed. His ideas were like hungry pigeons swooping down for bread, got its piece, then fled high over our heads, like really high. But he got it and chuckled to himself. BERN NIX. That classic guitar position, conservative leg cross, beanie cocked to the side, glasses down, a true artistic scientist, a modern sound hustler who lived in his own landline, second story, 2x4 laboratory world of his reality. From a time when the cobblestone Bowery wore sidewalks with a cracked, crumbled frown, non-plastic fermented garbage and galvanized cans with bent character that spoke in its own choice of accented language when you pass by on a Lower East Side runway with its share of broken dreams. We miss you, BERN. We miss you. With your unhurried, soulful, sinful sounds, your unhurried, soulful, simple sounds from an analog time. A leader who led without leading. As you were the middle of that musical vortex with a calm, humble head down on an open-ended homilodic search for golden notes to light up the dark matter presence and give character and direction with an elastic harmonic freedom of shape and sound. You were a teacher who came in peace, a teacher who came with intellect, a teacher who came with love, armed with a sense and understanding and a strong, steadfast tolerance of that pushback, that unrequited attitude which permeated and socialized the unconscious conscious who were spiritually deficient in their love for self, love of music, and love of truth. In spite of it, it gave fuel. It gave the fuel, the purpose, the desire to be a force for good. As you stood spoke and played your role as a sound warrior. As you stood, spoke, and played your role as a sound warrior, adding positive change to that frequency on the front lines of a dream deferred. BERN NIX, a special and humble scientist whose humility and humanity will be felt and echoed amongst the stars forever. We love you, BERN NIX. We love you. Peace.
How about another hand for Larry Rowland? Thank you so much, man. Everything I was trying to say. Next on the program, I never met her in person until today. And when I found BERN, one of the first things I had to do was reach out, and I found Edna Nix. Ladies and gentlemen, BERN's sister is going to say a few words. Thank you very much.
I'm not good at this.
I got you.
Save me. Save me.
I got you.
Okay.
I'll stay here. I'll stay up here with you.
All right. Good afternoon, friends and family. On behalf of our family, we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you who shared in Bernie's life and journey in any way. We always worried about my brother after my dad passed, but Bernie just loved New York, and he wasn't going to go anyplace else. He loved his band, and he loved playing his music. You all spent more time with him than I, and I thank all of you for loving him and assisting him with his first love, and that was his music. Bernie lived for his music, and yes, he beat to his own drum. The music moved him, and it defined him. So I will not try to mention names, because I'm sure I will forget some. So I will simply ask that all of you, you know so much of the differences you made in my brother's life. Because of your support, he got to live out his dreams, his way, and on his terms. I'd like to say a special thank you to Donardo and Matt and all his bandmates. The BERN NIX Trio and the BERN NIX Quartet. And definitely the young lady who just spoke. Where'd you go, Christine? Yeah, thank you, Christine. And Donardo, Arnett Coleman, and especially Dashel and all the Jazz Foundation. And if I forgot anybody, I apologize. But thank you for being his friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edna. Truly. And now, Mr. Matt Maneri and Mr. Keith Yawn are going to play for BERN. I saw Matt at the Vision Festival, and he told me that, actually, maybe I'll let Matt tell you himself about his encounter with BERN that I didn't know about. And as those guys set up, we got hopefully it's an easy setup. Just one addendum from Edna. Edna would once again like to stress her appreciation to the Coleman family, Donardo and Ornette, and just want to express that coming from Edna once again. And thanks.
Hello, everybody. Edna, that was beautiful. And I have so many great BERN stories. You don't feel it that way, or this, I mean, so many wonderful, hilarious stories. But my favorite story is how I met him originally. I was a young jazz musician with a chip on my shoulder, And I cold called him, said, would you play with me in Boston? And I sent him a tape, cassette tape or something. He's like, yeah, I'll do it. And I bought him a train ticket and he came over. And I had such a chip on my shoulder. I was like fighting the world, and he just came in, settled me down and said, let's just play, and soothed my soul. What a man, really did. He helped me through a very difficult period of my life and got me on the map for NYX. So, just wanted to say that.
Hi, I'm Keith. I met BERN, what I can't believe I'm saying is actually probably about 19 years ago when I first came to New York. And I was just wandering through the East Village, and I looked down the street and I'm like, that's BERN NIX. And walked right up to him and just introduced myself. And he was so gracious and so nice. And we actually had a few years there where we just became good guitar geek friends. We would just sit around and talk about guitar things and play together. And we did a record together about that time with Matt and a good friend of ours, Johnny McClellan, who's also gone. And BERN was a beautiful guy. And you know, I remember his music, and I also remember his infectious laugh, which was great. You know, he was such a great person to be around. He made you feel very welcome, and for such a great musician, that was a big deal to me, and I'll never forget it. Thanks, BERN.
I want to say one more thing. I can't stop talking. But we did this record together. It was the music of Messiaen. It was called Amen. It was a very spiritual record. So we're going to do a little of that and do one of BERN's things. But one thing I really want to say about BERN was he was a paradox of all-knowing. He had the self-wink, like, I get it, this is ridiculous, oh my God. But at the same time, the joy of a young boy just going, music. You can't buy it, you can't make that. That's the spirit of BERN.
Thank you, Bern.
All right. Who am I at? Over there, Rob?
Yes, thank you. All right. In fact, if you can move that mic off stage. Thank you.
How about another hand for Matt Maneri, Keith York? That was a Bern tune at the end, if y'all didn't know. And up next, ladies and gentlemen, this is not on the program. We're going to stop off for a second, and we have another family member. We are honored that Mr. Rick Nix is here, and he's going to say some words about his dear brother, Bern. Mr. Rick Nix, ladies and gentlemen.
First of all, I'd like to echo the sentiments of my sister and thanking everybody who had anything to put this event on. And I am not going to repeat all of the names of the people who, with the Jazz Society and with his band, played a role in giving him life, played a role in sustaining his soul. My brother Bern, there's a lot that we shared. He was the first intellectual I ever met in my life in person. He had great commitment, consciousness, and character. From elementary school, before the age of 9, his burning desire in life was to own a guitar. His sole purpose in asking our parents every Christmas, he wanted a guitar. And I remember the first plastic one he got. And he literally played the strings off of that one. And I remember the first acoustic guitar that he got. I remember the photo. He was so proud of that guitar. I remember the photo of him and that guitar. I remember his first music teacher, Mr. Shornack, on Monroe Street. And my father would put me in the car and Bern with the guitar, and I would sit and listen to him play from the scale books of, I think it was Mel Bay, I believe. And those, he would practice those scales. You would hear it in the house day and night. But you know something? I knew then that he was living his dream. There are very few of us in life that at that age, we know what we want to do. We are lasered in on it, and we go through the suffering, the pain. No matter what anyone tells you, you're still the same. You're on that road. There's another part of Bern that a lot of people don't know. He was a prolific writer. He kept journals from adolescence. There's a warehouse now somewhere with over 1 million words. 1 million words. From the age of 9, he studied 50 new words every single week. Every week. He never stopped. He never stopped. He was reading philosophy before the age of 10. He put together with neighborhood kids, got togas and sheets, and put on Julius Caesar.
I'm serious. I'm serious. These are things that I think you need to know. And these are the things that I shared with my brother. Wow. I looked up to him. And he's the one that taught me that if you're going to have a verbal confrontation with someone, present and search the facts. We would always get into these debates. And I would say, I feel. He said, yeah. Where's your facts? I said, but Bernie, you don't understand. Feelings are important. He said, get out of here. What's your references? What's your facts? And this was like, 12 and under. We'd get into these tremendous debates. There were these bunk beds, okay? My mother, God rest her soul, she kept those bunk beds, wow, for like 50, 60 years. And whenever I would go down to Virginia and visit, there would still be parts of that there. But he had the courage, the commitment, the consciousness, the creativity. Wow. He taught me lessons about that I will never forget. And he taught me how to think, and how to believe in the truth, no matter how hard it is or wherever it takes you. The truth in music and whatever you're doing, it's the truth. And this is not just a tribute for him tonight. This is a tribute to all of you who are making that journey and have made that journey with him. And as long as we remember him in our minds, our hearts, and our souls. And I'd like to thank the Jazz Society, because without you, the music is what cures the madness. The music is what is the medicine. And without the medicine, we're all doomed. God bless you all. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks again, Rick Nix. Powerful, spiritual, affirming words, man. Thank you so much. And that's actually a great segue. The Jazz Foundation is an important, very important. I'm sure that looking around, they've helped out more than a few of us in this room. They've bailed me out of trouble. They did a tremendous amount for Giuseppe Logan, and there was a guy in the Jazz Foundation, and he's going to come up now. And they had a special friendship. Dashiell Feeler wasn't just someone from the Jazz Foundation. He had Bern's back, and I mean that. I really mean that. Dashiell had Bern's back. I mean, he was there for him on the ultimate levels. And he's just going to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, Dashiell Feeler from the Jazz Foundation of America.
Thanks, Matt. And first I want to thank Matt for having me here. I'm really honored to be speaking at this, and for his actions after Bern's passing, which is really amazing. And thanks also to Thomas Goodman and Priscilla for having everyone here and for putting all of this together and allowing us to honor Bern in this way. And so, also, the Deputy Executive Director for the Jazz Foundation, Joseph Petroselli, is here, which I really appreciate. So I was lucky. Actually, Joe put me together with Bern. He was the one that reached out to Bern from the foundation at first. And I was lucky that for the past 6 years, I've been seeing Bern about once a month. And I almost feel like that was an opportunity wasted on me because I'm not like a torchbearer. He was just, one of my best friends. My favorite memories of Bern is when I would just go over his house and I would just bring like a bottle of wine and we would just hang out for hours and we listen to music. We listen to like the epic Kamasi Washington, like front to back. And he really liked that. And we would like make fun of music. And he would talk about his life and like everywhere he traveled and what was going on. And yeah, we just generally would hang out. And when I heard that Bern had passed on Facebook, I thought that it just wasn't happening. I mean, at the Jazz Foundation, it happens a lot that, we unfortunately see a lot of great artists pass away, but Bern was not someone that I ever thought about, And I started cursing him out, which I'm not going to repeat, like thinking that he still had a lot to accomplish in life. When I first met Bern, I was supposed to be interviewing him about harmonics, his response to harmonics, which he called avant traditionalism. And I was studying philosophy, and so I'd go over and we'd talk about different ideas. Like Bern was always infatuated by some idea, at any given point. And so I wish I could like impart some kind of wisdom from that, but Bern was someone that was too smart to really make definitive judgments about things. I remember that about him. It's kind of frustrating. And like now I feel pretty haunted by Bern in the sense that I almost constantly feel his judgment about things I'm doing or saying or like listening to. But I know that Bern would just be like, don't worry about it, man. Or people are just like that. And I remember the last time I saw Bern was on May 4th. He just played a gig. He apologized to me because he was like, I'm sorry, I'm still high from playing the gig. And then I invited him. We went to Katz's Deli and we got pastrami sandwiches. This is awesome. And the last time I ever spoke with him, I congratulated him on a gig at Lincoln Center. And I asked him if he requested a special amp, and he did. He told me that last time he played Lincoln Center, he went back home and they told him that he should move back to Toledo, start playing music people can wrap their heads around. So I told them that maybe they were just jealous. He thought a lot about his legacy, and he was really proud of having lived the life of a jazz musician. And that the work that he's done will continue on living after we're all dead. And I think, we talked a little about suffering and that Bern, he suffered for his life and his dreams, but I saw Bern actually, he had a lot of enjoyment in a lot of different things. I think there's a lot about Bern that we should envy. I know that, and it's been said before tonight, that he was definitely an authentic person. And he was really driven by his passions. And I believe he understood who he was and what he wanted, and he pursued all of that in his own way. And so when I heard Bern pass, my first response was to curse him because I thought that he still had a lot to accomplish, but I think that he accomplished a lot in his life. And I used to try to make sure that he acknowledged that. And I would congratulate him, and I still congratulate him on a life well lived, which I think full of purpose, integrity, and enjoyment. All right, thank you.
Thank you, brother. So we're going in deeper levels into Bern's soul, and now an even deeper level. Patrick Brennan has an actual short story that Bern wrote, and he's going to read it for us. He's a great alto player in his own right. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patrick Brennan.
Rick, Edna, hello. I sent you a Facebook message. We haven't actually done the face-to-face. Cindy, thank you for being here. And, of course, the Jazz Foundation for really having Bern's back for so many years. And to all of you. And then, of course, to Matt for doing this work. And the beautiful quartet, Reggie and Francois You know, I mean, then I can go on and on. I could talk for weeks about Bern. I mean, I just can't believe this. You know what I mean? I can't believe it. You know, I met Bern about 1978, and he instantly became my favorite guitarist, and he still is. Watch me break up. Anyway, you know, he was really a part of me. I mean, you know, these moments kind of really stick it in a way, you know. We did, you know, we played a lot together. I had a loft not too far from his in the late 70s and early 80s, you know, and, you know, Crazy Irish Lord would come over and we'd have some rather interesting scenes and things like that. I mean, we played all the time, you know, in an informal way. And, you know, then, you know, I wanted Bern to play my music, which is not easy to play. And we did a record together in '83, and then we, you know, we had a lot of other little things. I had a little string orchestra, and then, you know, I was out of the country for 10 years or something like that. And then we picked it up again when I came back to New York. And I had this amazing trio with him and Lyle Ellis. And I had another project for 3 electric guitars that he was the only person who could cut it. I actually rewrote the music so there was solo space for Bern. And I tried to raise some money with one of those crowdfunding things, couldn't do it. I finally got like about a third of the money to pay the cats because I realized I needed about enough money to pay people for a week of rehearsing to do this music. Well, anyway. You know, after the surprise, you know, it's not a popular thing to say at moments like this, but the next emotion I felt was anger. You know, I was so mad. You know, I was so angry about how hard it was for him. You know? And you start to feel helpless sometimes in a way with it, you know? It's like, he's the only musician, you know? I mean, I was only a little less broke than him most of the time. And, you know, when we'd put gigs together, I didn't tell Randy either. You know, I'd give him some money, you know? I wasn't supposed to give anybody money, you know, because we don't have that much, you know? But, you know, he's the only guy I would do that for. Because it was so hard for him, just living hand to mouth all the time and being such a great artist. And, you know, because I'm a composer, you know, we got, for all the friendship and hang out, you know, we had this kind of formal relationship, you know. We could hang out, we could rehearse all the time, but if I really wanted to do something, I really felt like I had to pay him, you know. So I'd have to wait till I get the money to do something, then wait some more, and then wait some more. And you know, I've thought about Bern almost every day for I don't know how many years because he's in my dreams musically. That's perfect for Bern. That's perfect for Bern, you know? And when we get this together, and when we get that together, you know, time's up. So, you know, that hurts, you know? I mean, that's not why we're here because of all the extraordinary things that he really is and all the extraordinary things he's done. Nobody has ever touched a guitar like him. Nobody has that attack. Nobody has that sound. I remember hearing with Jamil Moondot, you know, 10 musicians playing and Bern sound cuts right through, you know? I mean, nobody. Everything he played, you can sing it back. And in fact, okay, I got to go to the other part too. I'm not trying to, you know, I could go on for weeks, you know. Anyway, I'm going to read one of his stories, and then I'm going to play a solo of his that he played on the record we did way back in because I've been singing it ever since, you know. And then we'll take it out, and Reggie's going to play too, you know. You can even come out and play now when I do this story. Anyway, so, you know, Bern's a legendary storyteller. You know, everybody's already talked about his laugh, you know. Well, he also, and we know that he wrote. So there's a online art magazine called Art Adolia that was formed by Christine Hughes and Yuko Otomo and Randy Silv, my compañera. And, you know, Randy's the editor, but I found out that Dashiell actually edited Bern's work first before it got to Randy, and then she edited it. And then we published it. We have some cards for Art Adolia if anybody wants to see that stuff. We have 3 stories published, and Dashiell said he's got a couple of others. And also, Raymond Balley's son, Ray Balley, just wrote something that we posted today about a conversation he had with Bern. So anyway, I'm going to read one story. I couldn't figure out which one I was going to read because I couldn't fit them all in. But then I was talking with Rick earlier, and he was talking about the beginnings. So I'm going to read this story about his beginnings. Then I'm going to play a little bit of music inside our time frame. And, thank you all for being here. Thank you for loving Bern. Glad you're here. So this story is called, you can hit this with the brushes. When that comes, it's all about the sticks, Anyway, slouching towards Harmotopia. My first guitar teacher was probably in his late 50s or early 60s. This short, stocking man had a semi-bald head, pale, somewhat ruddy skin, and a harsh, autocratic voice that allowed him to speak in a crisp, abrupt manner. He almost invariably wore a tie, dress shirt, freshly polished shoes. Something about his demeanor and sartorial style reminded me of male movie characters from the 30s, 40s, and early 50s. His style of playing was also redolent of another era. One could hear echoes of Eddie Lang, Nick Lucas, Carl Kress, and others. After all, he did start teaching in 1927. I met him in the late 50s, a time when rock and roll was an ascensive art form. In fact, I remember when a young man sporting a DA strolled into the store and interrupted my lesson in order to find out how many lessons were needed to play like Dwayne Eddy. The store was full of vintage color illustrations, cowboys and cowgirls playing guitars around the campfire, youngsters who looked like members of our gang, and the Dead End Kids playing acoustic guitars or ukes while sitting on the stoop. Next to these pictures was a display case containing guitar picks, strings, pitch pipes, and other musical items. There was also a rack of sheet music, song folios, and various guitar methods. Nick Manahoff, Mel Bay, Henry Volpe, Eddie Lang. These are some of the names that seeped into my consciousness after seeing them on page after page of different publications. Various guitars are on display in the window of the shop. The one instrument that always caught my eye was a Sunburst Les Paul. One of my early lessons centered around learning to play taps, a melody that accommodated the standard tuning of the guitar in a manner that makes it relatively easy to play. My teacher never tired of telling me to tap my foot 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and down, up, down, up. A quarter note gets 1 beat, a half note gets 2 beats, and a whole note gets 4 beats. As stated earlier, normal speech for Mr. Shomack was a little more than a slightly modified growl that implied imprecation. Once he actually hit my guitar due to frustration over my lack of musical alacrity. I enjoyed music and wanted to play, but was frightened and in the clutches of performance anxiety. Learning the notes below middle C was problematic. Consequently, Reuben and Rachel was a melody I learned by rote simply because fear kept me from understanding the concept of ledger lines. All hell broke loose when I was found out. My teacher's face turned beet red as he yelled at me. My father had been showing me off to various relatives. On command, I would go through my repertory of chestnuts culled from the Eddie Acura method. Dear old Dad was also dismayed when he discovered my subterfuge. For him, this incident was yet another example of my lack of musical progress. Like my teacher, he gave me the Buddy Rich treatment. My mother tried to dissuade him from yelling. It was to no avail. The whole scene provoked another one of my sob sister routines. I was crying. In fact, I was always crying, and men don't cry. My father told me I was acting like a little girl. He grabbed my guitar and tried to play it. He had played the trombone as a young man. Once, I actually ran across a piece of sheet music with Tommy Dorsey's picture on it in the attic during one of my childhood foraging exercises. Eventually, my father and my teacher had a stormy confrontation. My teacher opined in the most stentorian manner possible that investment in my musical future was a waste of time. My desire to play music intensified despite my teacher's dire prognostication. Immersion in the world of music helped me contend with my parents' marital discord and consequent divorce. It also allayed so many problems attendant to entering the hormonal hell of adolescence. I saw a picture of Charlie Christian on a Columbia album cover when I was around 14. Since I was something of a jazz nerd, I was familiar with his name. In fact, I had already heard his recording of Honeysuckle Rose with the Benny Goodman Orchestra. It was fascinating. I wanted to learn how to play all those notes. In short, to improvise, play jazz. To be blunt about it, I was also fascinated and surprised by the fact that he was black. So many plectrists of that era cited him as an influence, but I knew very little about him other than the fact that, like Keats and Stephen Crane, he succumbed to TB at an early age. Later, I was to discover that he had grown up with novelist Ralph Ellison in Oklahoma. Maybe there was hope. Artists in general seem to have immunity to the tedious rigor and banality of routine existence. They don't worry about becoming a scout or receiving communion on a regular basis. They had a stern discipline that saw them through the quotidian madness that passes for normality. In many instances, they even modified the norm in a manner that was novel as well as amenable. Reading Downbeat, Mad Magazine, and listening to Lenny Bruce records only abetted this attitude. One could contend that this was the idealized attitude of a socially maladjusted 14-year-old, but it's still with me. Stand up, Bert, stand up. You all recognize that voice, don't you? You remember those scenes, don't you? Now a little bit of paraphrase BERN NIX. This isn't a guitar. You'll hear it. I don't know if I need that, but well, it's for the. Oh, you're recording, right? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Excuse me, I'm noising on that. Okay, here we go.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to ask for a little bit of help at this time, we got to set up that piano. Can the musicians in the house, Pat, can you start pulling that thing out, man? And Steve, Mr. Dolachinsky, would you be into saying a few words while we set up?
Of course he would.
Steve. Okay. So, coming up, Mr. Dolachinsky is gonna speak about BERN while we set up Mr. Donardo Coleman and Sharnette Moffitt, and they're gonna play for BERN. Steve's gonna talk to y'all while we set up. So forget about what we're doing over here. Just forget about all that. Just hang out with Steve.
So, sir, you say I know you. Where do I know you from?
Hell's Kitchen Cultural Center.
Hell's Kitchen Cultural Center. And you? No, I don't know you actually. What I got to do a comedy act here? I am not prepared for this. So, when Matt said to me earlier, would I like to speak? I said no, which kind of surprised him. But what I told Matt he should say on my behalf was very simply that BERN was one of the sharpest people and also one of the humblest people I personally ever met. And I enjoyed getting drunk with him, even though I don't like to drink. So I don't really know exactly what to say, but I know BERN originally the way Christine and other people in this room know BERN. We all started going to these crazy parties on the Lower East Side. Ganamir was one of them. This guy Lawrence was another one. All these great painters, and they all like to hang out in this bar a lot in the Lower East Side. And they would always say to me, "Why don't you come and hang out in the bar?" And I said, "Well, I don't drink." So it was kind of lovely. And I always wanted to talk about art. And BERN was one of the few people, if I got him on the side, we could talk about, almost anything. But I actually don't know what to say, which is very weird, but he wants me to kill time. So anybody have any questions? Mark, you have a question? You look, no question. Good. Randy, question? Questions from the audience? No questions. Well, you have anything else you want to say? What was Hell's Kitchen Cultural Center about?
Rhythm in the Kitchen Music Festival.
Oh, the Kitchen Music Festival. Yes, that's true. That's true. You have anything to say? Because you have a Russian accent, and there's not too many people here with other...
I can speak with a Russian accent for as long as you wish.
I could do that too, But, Matt, do you want to say something else? See, I'm totally speechless, which is pretty unbelievable. Wait. I do have a question for the people who wait. I do want to know why the Pernil has. No. You want to say something?
I like to tell everybody that Patrick Red is just a little of his writing. He was a great writer. He left. I should talk to him.
Now I got to be the MC.
Oh, you want to finish?
No time to be shy.
I just finished my thought. Like Patrick read the piece, the short story, BERN was not just a great musician who had integrity to keep his passion and philosophy, everything intact, amongst all those, the pains and sufferings, everything insult them. But anyway, he left so many writings. He was a great writer. As Patrick said, Christine, Hughes, Randy, Sylv, and myself, we have a critical writing forum run by artists. And we invited BERN to submit. And he gave us a few writings. But this is just a little tip of iceberg. We really have to pay attention to his writing, because not just writing about music, his childhood memories, how he, whatever he went through, hundreds of notebooks. And this has to be taken care of in a right mode and to be shared with other people. So this is just, we have to put in our mind. I don't know how to proceed the whole process, but it's a great thing to remember. Yes, that's all I say.
Hey, hello. Well, I'm Dick Griffin, a trombonist, and I met Burns at, we actually rehearsed for about a year in a group that never really performed. It was called The Net. We were learning Arnett Coleman's music, and it was a quartet, a guy named Rich, alto player, Burns, and Sipo Kunaz, and hello, can you hear me? No, yeah, okay. But anyway, probably this is the directional mic. Anyway, a few days before Bern passed away, I would always bump into him on 23rd Street. And we would have the most intellectual conversations. And the last one we had was about Jamaluddin. And he said Jamaluddin was hard to get in touch with, right? And this is really true. He called me up and talked about a project that we were supposed to do at the MoMA. And I was telling Bern about it. He said he did the same thing. He had a gig for him, and nobody could catch up with him. So now this is sad because he said, call me, and I'm going to give you Jamaluddin's number. And I never got to call him to get that number. And the next thing I heard that he had passed away. So, but we would just 23rd Street, because he lives down 7th Avenue and 20th, somewhere in that area. And we would just stand and have the most intellectual conversations about that group that rehearsed for a year that never played a gig. And, all our connections, and he was a special person. So I just want to say that.
Mr. Dick Griffin in the house. Thank you, Mr. Griffin. And we're headed towards the twilight now. It is a tremendous honor for me to introduce to you Mr. Donardo Coleman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, and so I want to bring up, we're going to play a tune for Burns, so we're going to bring up some of the primetime members. Dave Bryan on piano. Yeah. Kenny Wessel on guitar. And long-time Harmonic family member Charnette Moffett on bass. So it's my pleasure to be here. And thank you, Matt, for all you've done and are doing for Burns. It's a beautiful night, really a beautiful night. Yeah. And I want to thank Burns' family and then Rick for sharing Burns with us. He was, as you can tell, he touched everybody. Everybody in this room is so deeply touched by Burns, the person and the musician. And he was just that unique a person who inspired other people because he had no agenda or ego except for being committed to music. And it's just so pure. You don't run into people that pure. So he was an inspiration to people who could be around him and could feel his energy. So I met Burns when Burns met my father, through his father, through your father. Your father connected Burns with my father. And he said, look, you got to hear my son play. And Burns had just graduated from Berkeley. Well, before you knew it, Burns was living with my father. That's how impressed he was with him and his musical sensibility. And so, that's when we became family. So Burns was like another son to my father. So I've been fortunate to play with Burns for a long time, and in many situations, very unique. Not only did he become a musical son to my father, but also to my mother. So poet Jane Cortez. So it's a yeah. So Burns and I shared just a rich musical world and musical way of life, and so it was my pleasure to spend that kind of time with him. And the thing about Burns, which was so compatible with both my parents, is they were both deep thinkers, as was Burns. So that was just a connection on so many different levels for him. As James Blood Ulmer would say, you have to be a harmonic person to be a harmonic musician. And that's what Burns was, a harmonic person, which means you're open. You're open to the world, and you're trying to get the world more open to itself. That way we can all be, we could all live in that energy that's really so nice. So Burns was just deep and special, and so he was really soulful as well. I know he's, intellectual, cerebral and all that, but he was really deeply soulful in his playing. And sometimes, particularly my mother, she said, look, we're going to reach way back and take the blues back home. And Burns would kick that in. It was like, okay, here we go. So, no, he's going to be really missed. And just the timing of everything. We have this primetime reunion coming up next week, this Ornette Festival. And first time we're all getting together in like 30, 40 years or whatever. And you don't really know something until it happens. So once that was announced, there was so much excitement about prime time getting back together again. I knew we were, we were known, but there was a lot of excitement. And particularly, is it Bern going to be there? Is Jamal? Really. So, wow, okay, we all felt really good. And we only got to rehearse once together, right? But it was a great time because we all came together. Like I said, it had been 30 or 35 years of all playing together and playing my father's music. And it just took us right back to the days when we did all that traveling and touring and started telling stories, and Burns, cutting everybody, in half with his humor. And so that was just a beautiful day. The family got back together. The nice thing about it also, just musically, it was, different because my father wasn't there. So, we're doing that without him. And see, what Burns used to do would be to shadow my father on the melodies and harmonies. So he was really right there in terms of, putting that musical information out. So we said to Burns, well, now you're stepping up. And Burns, so we started playing melodies we hadn't played in a long time. And Burns cut into everything and just led that rehearsal. So we were all just so looking forward to doing this thing. So it's coming up next week. So we're doing it for Burns next week. It's going to be good. I hope to see everybody there. So we're going to play a song right now for Burns. Thank you.
Matt Maneri, Ross Moshe. Donardo is going to set up Dancing in Your Head, and we're going to rock out on this tune. And so how about one last, what can we say? One last, give it up for BERN NIX. BERN NIX. BERN NIX. BERN NIX. BERN NIX. Ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da. This is for BERN.
Excuse me, can you just play the piano so I can hear if you... Yeah, now I need it, but there's no chord in it? Yeah, I got one right there. There's a chord in it right there.
Hey man, you were wonderful. This event is wonderful.
Okay, that's it. The only thing left to do now is remember Bern. There he is right there. There he is right there. Yeah. Rest in peace, everybody. Check out Prime Time at Lincoln Center on the 14th. On the 14th is coming right up. Prime Time's gonna be at Lincoln Center. Go check that out. Thank you. Peace.
I grew up a little south of Petersburg, so Vern and I used to talk about that.
Yep, no problem. You can do it. You can do it. I hope so. A couple of years ago, the short one. The Korean woman you were chatting about. That's your ass. That's a great view. No, unfortunately, I bought it a bunch of years back, like 15 years back.
We have to go, but I want to stay and then we talk, okay?
So this is 15 years old. Yeah. The problem is, I spend all my time playing that. The bass. So it's nice that there doesn't get used much. And I mean, Andy Summers, Jimi Hendrix, Jim Paul, you know, you want to sound like all these guys and all this stuff. And it's just like, you know what? And that's what I did. Yeah, no, I'm just saying, it's just like, I can't do on this instrument